is the allegiance of the UN. Now, I don't think in any of the stuff I've looked at that we can find an allegiance. Now, let me make it quite clear here tonight. In relation to the Crown of the United Kingdom, I'm not a monarchist, and neither am I a Republican. I'm simply here to say that either of those sides are going to slam dunk you. Now there it says Charter for Global Democracy, a charter to achieve global governance. I love the way they use words that are really not the correct word. A charter to achieve global governance has been developed for presentation at the Millennium Assembly in September. It was made available to the public on UN Day, October 24, 1999. Now remember the date because of the next slide. Now see here it says at the bottom, we added that, global democracy is in fact international socialism. So they use a word that appears to be a word that appears to be okay, but in actual fact it's the opposite. Now remember I said, remember the date, October 1999. The Commonwealth of Australia voted on November 1999 for the Australian people voted in a constitutional referendum on whether Australia should become a republic and whether to insert a preamble. So in October 1999 you all went to the things relative to a referendum and you said no, we're staying with what we know. What they never told you is in October of 1999 the UN had already voted to bring Australia in. Now should I repeat that? Because that's the biggest slam dunk you've ever had. So it effectively means your November 1999 issue was overridden by the UN. Now all your boys here knew all that, which is why an act appeared in Victoria in May 2000 that took the Oath of Allegiance out of the Legal Practice Act in Victoria, which in actual fact meant that we don't respect your referendum decision. And it actually means that when the Oath of Allegiance comes out of the Legal Practice Act, no lawyer in Victoria is acting legally. They're under another jurisprudence now. It's a UN one. Because they're not stupid enough, they're all lawyers, to actually say, well, I'll probably put my legal career in jeopardy unless they've been told by somebody else, we're going to look after you. But what's the intention? To slam dunk the Aussie. Because the first thing the Aussie thinks, well, we better take this to the courtrooms. We better get a lawyer. The problem is all the lawyers have already got rid of the Oath of Allegiance. Are you getting the point? Which means your lawyers sold you out first. Next one please, United Nations. Now this is very important. Soviet nationals who outranked the generals of the United States Armed Forces, who by agreement have submitted their forces to the United Nations Security Council. Now look at the boys of the security boys. United Nations Under Secretary of the Security Council. The following is a list of names of Soviet nationals who have held the above post in the United Nations, thereby having every military force in the world submit to them. Now you'll see shortly that Jeffries, your former governor of West Australia, the head of the SAS, is clearly involved in this program. And all he's done is pass the baton to Quentin Bryce. We'll see that. Now since 1946, all of these are Soviet nationals and comes down to 1988. There's the names of who held those posts. So in essence, you're handing your kids over to communism. Is that clear there? Is that clear?
Yep.
Well, a lot of your preachers in this town are sitting quiet on this. And in essence, they're not doing what they should be doing in relation to God. If anyone should be honest in this issue, it should be the preacher. I'm saying that quite clearly. Because of accountability with God. United Nations and communism. It was primarily communist in tone. Its charter, signed in 1943, being based upon the Constitution of Soviet Russia. Do you like those words? It links it to Russia. While its purpose and principles were decided at a conference of foreign ministers held in Moscow, The secretaries of the United Nations Security Council between the years 1946 and 62 were, those two people, both communists. A leading figure of the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organisation, UNESCO, that's the one that's going to get the children. That's the one that's dictating all the policies of how the kids get educated throughout the world. Was that person, a communist. The Chief Secretary for UNESCO was Madame Jalova, communist, while the President, Vice President and 9 judges of the World Court were all communists. That's from the Broken Cross. Whenever you go into a law court, you can put that stuff in as long as you quote the source. As long as you quote sources, you can put it into affidavit work. UNESCO. Now have a little look at what the compilation of this is. Honestly, and we won't go back into where all this framed from and whatever, because this is not a courtroom presentation. I don't need to produce the evidence. It can go up there and they can work it out. Under Huxley, UNESCO envisaged the destruction of children's love of country and patriotism as the first step to a one-world state. Talk to your children about this and listen to their answers. And you'll see how much of that is already gone. Under a one-world government, Huxley envisaged it, and under communism, the teachers are the principal formers of your child's mind. That's the United Nations agenda. Hand them over to them, is what they're saying. United Nations Association of Australia Incorporated. Do you like that title? We've even got an incorporated organisation here to run this. Guess who the patron is? Governor General Quinton Bryce. Vice patrons, Adams, Alexander, Berton, Gareth Evans, Andrew Gaze, Nozzle, Packpoy, Andrew Peacock and Michael Kirby. Now do you all know who Michael Kirby is? Just retired High Court judge. Also charged for grand jury work because he's revealed the fact that he's concealed the fact the Crown's been removed from Western Australia. So we have Hawke's address in 1984 to the Fabian Socialists, which clearly shows your Prime Minister at the time was a Fabian Socialist. But in 1986 he introduced the Australia Act and actually enacted it himself. That was a good piece of work, wasn't it? Now in the Australia Act of 1986, would it require a Commonwealth referendum if you've ever read the Act?
Should have been.
Did you have one?
No.
Well, they're bypassing your constitution, they're bypassing your juries, they're bypassing grand juries, and they're stamping all over you. When are you going to stand up, Aussie? It says there, this is his portion of his speech, and there's a website thing there at the bottom. It says this, which is a hallmark Fabian Socialist trademark statement. For the right moment you must wait, as Fabius did, most patiently, when warring against Hannibal, though many censured his delays. But when the time comes, you must strike hard, as Fabius did, or your waiting will be in vain and fruitless. Now what's he saying to strike hard at? What's the next one? Julia Gillard, your current Deputy Prime Minister, also charged for a grand jury matter pending in the Supreme Court in Victoria. Not yet heard, but she's now dictating your policies for Australia. It says speech to the inaugural Fabian Society inaugural dinner, 31st of August 2000 in Melbourne. There you can download that website. Julia Gillard is also in the program. Julia Gillard has full knowledge the Crown's been removed. Julia Gillard shouldn't be sitting in any parliament in this country. Beasley's statement, and I'm going to read it twice. The United Nations has given federal government a mandate of ownership for houses, farms, property and business to government control once the Republic has been proclaimed. One of the ladies said to me last night when we were having tea and bickies after I'd asked the question, she said, I've met you once before. I said, where'd you meet me? So I come to one of your lectures. I'm not interested in the monarch being chucked out because I'm a Republican. Well, hello. What's a Republican going to do? Hand it to the UN. Is that correct? Because there it is there. Why you've still got your constitution, let me make it real simple to you, please. You got the bank robbers coming out of the bank. They've still got their guns, they've got all the loot, they've got the balaclavas on, and they run into the getaway car. The getaway car is the Republic, which they then jump in and drive it around and park it in the garage of the United Nations. Then they've achieved the robbery. But what has just happened? We've found the getaway car before they could get in it. Once the Republic has been proclaimed, they're not waiting for the Republic. They've told them to suspend your constitutions and suspend them 4 years ago.